Hey, it's Craig Hulk again. I'm down in Tucson, Arizona, my friend Jim's. A couple years ago, we were talking about trying to find a treasure story. I had a lot of documentation, something we could go back and really research and possibly find where the treasure was, okay? And Jim came up with this idea that the dam collapsed in 1890. It was called the Walnut Grove Dam back in 1890 that gave way. And a saloon disappeared and it had a safe in it and a barrel of whiskey. And as far as I know, it's never been found. There's been a couple articles said it was, but we're going to show you that most possibly it hasn't ever been found. And we had to try to figure out where the saloon sat. So if you think about a dam failing, you think it's going to be downstream of the dam somewhere in that path and washed it away. But anyhow, I'm going to show you in a map here some of the area and the terrain, kind of give you an idea of what was going on. And then we'll go back in a little bit of history of the dam, how this area built up. And then it's the guy named Bob Breaux who owned the saloon, how he come to own it, where it was, and how he finally ended up in Prescott owning the Palace Saloon there. So there's a lot of history involved in here. During the time of 1890, Arizona was still a territory. Prescott was a capital of the territory from 1877 to 1889, and then it shifted down to Phoenix in end of 1889, and Phoenix became the capital to become a state in 1912, and Phoenix is still the capital today. So let me show you here a few things on the map so you get an idea of what we're looking at and what we're talking about. When you hear some of these names, you'll know what we're talking about. All right, so let's cut away and I'll give you a close-up of the map. All right, we're looking at the map here. This circle down here is Wickenburg. So we come up to Wickenburg and we go on out west and we come up Highway 69 all the way up to Congress. Stay on it. Come over to Yarnell and on up towards Kirkland Junction. Just before we get to Kirkland Junction, which this road goes on to Prescott this way, and go through Skull Valley that way to get to Prescott the back way. But anyway, you turn right on Wagner Road, and you'll see a sign out here with a whole bunch of ranches named on it. But you follow Wagner Road back, I think it's approximately 18 miles. You come back in here, and you come by right here. This is where the town of Walnut Grove was. And you come on down in the town of Wagner. And at one time, Wagner was sometime, I think it was 1864 when it started building, and it had a 10-room boarding house and grocery store and stuff right there. And you come on down a couple miles, and here's approximately where the dam was located. As this floodplain narrowed down into this canyon, they built a dam across here, okay? That was the Walnut Grove Dam. It dammed up water for a couple miles, like 750 acres in here, about 100 feet deep. And if you follow on down, this is the Hassayampa River. And if you notice, these little dots here, it goes through all these steep canyons, going all the way down, just back and forth. It's about 25 miles probably down to Wickenburg. And you finally go past, this is Fool's Gulch. There was a lot of mining going on in there. And it comes on by Box Canyon. That's where they thought about rebuilding the dam at one time because it's very narrow. And as it comes out into this area here, then once you see how it spreads out all the way on down, a little narrow canyon here till it comes down and hits Wickenburg. Okay, so if we come back up to the dam, and when it gave way, all at once you've got, the dam was 110 feet high. You have water 60 to 80 foot deep going through these canyons, just like a pinball. It was shooting through there. They said they lost between 70 and 100 people. And by the time it hit Wickenburg, is spread out. It was about 18 to 20 foot high of water going through Wickenburg. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Let's move over to this map over here. That map over there was 1 in 50,000. It covered like 10 quadrangle maps. This one's down to about 4 quadrangles. It's probably about 1 in 20,000. But you see here, you got Walnut Grove. Come on down, and you got Wagner, and you come on down a little further, and the road turns back this way. But right out in here, that's where the Walnut Grove Dam was, okay? So to give you a little history of that, when they started to build the dam back in 1886, they just started building it, got 40 foot high. It was the just wooden cribbing and rock, and they said fish were even swimming through it. So they got a proper engineer, re-engineered it, and started building it. And it was 100 foot wide at the base, 400 foot wide at the top, and 140 feet wide at the bottom. And it was all large granite stones on the outside with a rock fill in the middle. And to hold the water from leaking through it, they used a double 3-inch planking with tar paper and caulking and some type of waterproof paint to hold that water. They had a 5 foot by 5 foot gate on the bottom that they could supposedly open and let water flow through it, okay? The original bypass channel was supposed to be over here in a low area, but they thought it was too costly, so they built a little overflow right next to the dam. And that was one of the big failures of why it failed, okay? So let's break away from that for just a second. I'll fill in a little bit of history of this whole area. In 1863, after the California gold rush was over in 1849, a lot of people came back to Arizona and started looking for gold. And they started finding it clear down around Ewan, Picacho mines down there around 1863 to 1865. Riverboats going up and down the Colorado River, all the mines going on there. They found gold up in this area, a place called Rich Hill, which was on the map here. You see it, Rich Hill? Well, there's a place called the Potato Patch over close to Rich Hill. And that was called that because nuggets are almost as big as potatoes. And there was a lot of placer gold there. The other place was up just close to Prescott, was called Lynx Creek. And they had a lot of gold up in that area. And that creek flowed this way, so it didn't tie into the Hassayampa. And these are the Bradshaw Mountains, okay? And also in 1863, Henry Wickenburg came here from the California gold fields and went prospecting down close what they call Vulture's Peak. And he made a strike. He found a quartz vein, had gold in it, so he filed a claim on it. And that became one of the richest gold mines in Arizona's history. In a couple of years, Henry sold 80% of that mine. And he went ahead and he was deeded 160 acres along the Hassayampa River, which is now the town of Wickenburg. He owned quite a few claims down the river. He was developing agricultural land, and there was a mill south of Wickenburg, around Seymour. Okay, when that flood come through, 18 foot of water washed out or destroyed pretty much Henry Wickenburg's agricultural land along the river. It took out the little town of Seymour, which had a general store there. There was supposedly $1,500 worth of stashed up in the rafters of that store. It disappeared. It was called the Congress Store in Seymour, and just a little downstream was the mill for the Vulture mine, and that all got taken downstream, they said, as far as 30 miles. And they found bodies up to 30 years later downstream. They never did find them all. They figured it was 70 to 100 people lost during that flood. So that was around 1863. You had a lot of things going. And you had two brothers that come out here from New York around 1864 in that area. They bought a gold mine and 63 claims on the Hassayampa River. Okay, so then they filed a claim on the Hassayampa River for all the water. So they wanted to build a reservoir. So they figured how we're going to raise money, and they went back to New York, since they was from back east, and they started a corporation. They started selling shares in it, so Walnut Grove Water Company. Well, they found out they made more money selling shares than they did actually mining. So they sold a bunch of shares and started building this reservoir. All right, that's how it got built, and they started building it in 1880, 87, pretty much completed by 1888, and it was filling up. And we're going to show you some old pictures here in a little bit showing you the building the dam, the reservoir filling up, and some other things like that. And it's a picture of what it looks like today. All right. This is an old photograph of the dam showing it just about completed with the stone facing on the downstream side. You notice the water already rising on the upstream side. And this is a picture of the dam pretty well completed with a tower there that operates the gate that went through it. And our next shot will show the reservoir pretty well full, and in the background you notice the construction camp over on the side of the hill. That's where the saloons, boarding house, and everything was happening over there. And here's a little picture of everybody out enjoying the reservoir with their boats and sailing for the day. And in 1890 February, after that, this is what it looked like after the dam collapsed and gave way. This was all that was left. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Jim. He's going to tell a little bit about the books he's researched, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the few things we found out on the ranch. We've got the permission to go on the private property a couple times to do some research. But anyway, Jim's going to tell you about what he's found so far, and we'll talk through a few things. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, thank you, Greg. What I want to point out first is that this was written about, the dam disaster was written about by David Dill back in August or autumn of 1987, published in the Journal of Arizona History. David was working on his PhD at the time, the University of Arizona, and he researched it to a high degree and got some very useful information out of it, or about it. Many of the photos are available in the Charlotte Hall Museum, but another connection with the dam is that one of the consultants was William Blake, who was University of Arizona's first geology professor. Some of the examples of construction are included. There are some photos in the journal publication of before and after. It's well worth searching it out. And one of the most intriguing ones is a picture of sailing boats on the final reservoir, which the photo was taken probably just a few months before the disaster finally occurred. Since that time, another interesting publication came out by Professor Jim Liggett, who was a chemistry teacher at Cornell for 35 years. He researched David Dill's work and added a great deal of his own and published a tremendous book. Then Greg will go into the availability on this one, but there's a lot of good technical information about the dam and its history, both before and after the flood occurred. This flood was greater than the Johnstown flood as far as the volume of water released from the dam. And the dam was also one of the largest ones in North America, if not the world at the time, that was strictly masonry. Interestingly, the background at the time was very popular with the general public in the West because of the water storage problem. Even Scribner's magazine published a beautiful picture looking downstream just a month before the dam failure. We went out to the site. We got permission to go to the ranch, and we were allowed to do a little artifact hunting and searching. One of the things we came across was the grave site, which is next to the public road that drives through the ranch. And this grave site is for Captain or Colonel James Clark Hunt. And here's an example of where the grave site is. The dam site is in the pinch point in the Hassayampa River here. The road wraps around this point in Minnehaha Wash. It's a soul cemetery, or soul grave in the cemetery reported there were children buried there. But the irony is that Colonel Hunt was with Superintendent Brown at the night watching the dam fail, and he died within a month after the dam failed. Why he's buried there is still a mystery. We're trying to determine that. But Greg will point out some of the things that we've come across now.
Okay, while we were out there searching around, we went up on a hill where the actual construction camp was. And through our research, we found out there was a general store, a warehouse, 2 saloons, a boarding house. And with all this, you see the boats on the reservoir become a very popular place. In fact, there was boat builders come in to build these boats, and they had a 12-month waiting time just to build boats to go on the reservoir. But when we were up there walking around after the dam failure, everybody went up there and started taking and stripping the side of all the lumber and everything up there. So when we was up there, about the only thing was left was some stone foundations and a lot of pottery shards, broken plates and stuff like that. And then we started picking up some of the pieces, and I'll let Jim tell you about it. He did some research on this, and his wife, they got really interested because it showed some of the insignias on the back of the plates. So you want to tell them about that, Jim?
Yeah, some of the items, all we found were very small pieces of pottery, but they have the emblem of the fabrication source in England. So we looked up these based on their insignias and managed to track down just exactly where they were made, the date that they were made, and the interesting fact about it is that all this pottery came from England by ship at the time, and we only find a few pieces left, but what it signifies is that this was becoming a go-to spot for people in Phoenix, much lower in elevation, and here's a beautiful reservoir to come up and go boating. There were boat building businesses there, there were boarding houses, and obviously of interest to us is the saloons that Bob Brow owned.
Okay, well, we were chasing up all of this, and Jim was researching newspapers week by week, starting in 1887 out of the Prescott Minor Magazine, our newspaper. He was researching that, trying to find anything he could find about Bob Brow's Saloon and what was going on there. And I was out chasing leads. A couple of them one was on the internet, said that the safe had been found and that it was in the basement of the Wickenburg Museum. So I went up to Wickenburg to chase it down, talked to the curator of the museum, and she says, no, there's never been a safe in our basement. The only old safe I know came off a ranch, and it's over in the clerk's office or the town hall. One other article I found was through the Arizona Constable Association, and on the front cover of it was Bob Brow, and he was a constable at Prescott from 1907 to 1909. And in this article, it talked about he's losing the saloon, and the safe disappeared with $10,000 worth of gold in it. And then it said when he was all out of luck, he lost everything, but within a month they found the safe, okay? Well, I called the guy that wrote the article, and I asked him, I said, where did you find your information? Where did you get your information? And he said, well, let me get back to you on that. He said, give me a couple weeks and I'll research that. So I did, and I contacted him again. He said, he said, I went back and searched newspapers, and I found in 1908 an article that said the safe had never been found. Okay, so that kind of shot that one down too. So I don't think anybody's ever found the safe, even though some people say it has, and we chased down any lead we could find to try to prove it hadn't been found. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back to Jim because he's going to continue on and tell you a little bit about some of the newspaper articles he found and kind of leads us to believe what we think the saloon was.
Thanks, Greg. The big question is, where was Bob Brow's saloon? And there are many possibilities. One of the ones pointed out by Thomas Probert in his Lost Mines, Buried Treasures of the West, where he briefly alludes to the Hassayampa flood treasure. He gives a general locale as near Old Fool's Gulch Dam. Now, Fool's Gulch is quite a ways downstream from Walnut Grove. It's just upstream from Box Canyon, where there was another dam planning to be built, but it was a much smaller work camp. It was nowhere near as large as the construction camp up at the dam site. So it makes more sense that the saloon would be at the construction site for the main dam. Plus, we know from newspaper articles that people were shooting waterfowl from the porch on his saloon. So it was lakeside, so to speak. There's another mention of Bob Brow's saloon at Walnut Grove, and the water's already past where the saloon was. So he had to have moved the saloon while the reservoir was rising. We've seen other references to Goodwin Station, which has no specific location. That's a difficult one to track down. We've seen mention of other saloon names. We do know from newspaper references that Bob Brown not only had the first saloon, but he bought another saloon that was there. So he actually owned two saloons at the location, which is probably very close to the time of the dam failure, because that's when the bigger influx of people occurred, coming up to go sailing or fishing or hunting. So the evidence suggests that in all likelihood the saloon was lakeside, above the dam, and was probably washed away when the floodwaters rose so high that they overtopped the dam by 3 feet. And if the saloon were at lakeside, that means it probably was underwater by the time the water reached that level. And so with the outwash, it just took the saloon, the safe, and therein lies the story.
I had a pretty good idea where the saloon was. So if you're interested in the book that Jim Liggett wrote, I went and talked to Mr. Liggett. Jim set that up. We went and talked to Mr. Liggett, and he let us republish his book, and you can find it on our website at Desert Roamer Press. And if you're interested in getting, Jim wrote a paper up on these pottery shards that we found, and they come from 5 different pottery factories all in the same area of England. So it was very interesting to knowing about that. I'm going to also post that on the website and our blog. Okay, so you can, if you're interested, you know, you can have a read of that. But next, we're going to head on out. We're going to go up. I'll take you up to that area, and we'll walk around we'll take you to some of the things to see at Old Walnut Grove here, see if we can't see the schoolhouse, the old cemetery. We'll drive on around and give you some other views of where the dam was and that whole valley. And then we'll walk over to that cemetery and give you a little shot there. And then we're going to take you up to Prescott. This happens to be a July 4th weekend, so it's Prescott Frontier Days, and it's billed as the oldest rodeo in the world. So it's probably going to be pretty busy. And Bob Breaux actually ended up owning the Palace Saloon in Prescott. So, and inside that saloon, it's the girls kind of dress up old Western and whatever, but in the wall, there's a safe. It says Bob Breaux safe on it. It's the one he had at that saloon. I think it's very interesting. It's very ornate. We'll take a picture of that and a little bit of downtown and a few other things. So stick around. Let's go for a drive and we'll show you some other stuff. Okay, let's take off now. Well, we just turned off the highway here. We're going back on Wagner Road. So this is a turnoff back on Wagner Road. Okay, we just stopped at the old Walnut Grove School here. It's about 11 miles off the highway. We just thought we'd stop here and give you a quick shot of the old school and the playground around it before we head on down to the graveyard. All right? Okay, we come back, and we had to go through a private ranch to get permission to come back here, but this is the old Walnut Grove Cemetery, and there's a lot of history here, and you can research on. Here's another shot. We talked to the lady at the ranch, and she knew a lot about this and has a lot of information. We probably do a follow-up documentary later on because there's so much history here of this area and the families that actually settled this area. So we're going to go ahead on out of here, and we're going to head on down towards the Walnut Grove Dam site. And that's probably about 3 miles from here. We've come about 18 miles back, and this is a valley that used to be flooded where the reservoir was. And look in the background, you see kind of a cut through the mountains. That's where the dam was. This is the old picture of what it looked like when it was flooded, and you see the construction camp again in the background. And this is all that's left of the construction camp, some stone ruins. That's about it. Most everything was taken away. We've got just a couple of foundations left and a couple of chimneys. That's about it, and a bit of scrap metal. That's about all we could find. This is looking at where the dam is today. And you can see the approximate top of the dam, the bypass channel going around it, and the area where they blasted for rock above it. There's another shot of it. And if you go over to the right side, you can see this rock wall is below where they blasted rock to help hold everything in place so it didn't slide downhill. And this next picture is the right abutment to the dam. And then turning around, we're looking upstream back into the valley. On the other side, the left abutment, this is what it looks like, looking downstream. And this is what it looks like kind of looking down the hill into the river bed. This is another shot of the left abutment looking upstream into the valley. And when they build dams, they usually have a diversion tunnel they channel water through while they build the dam. So they blasted this through the rock while they built the dam. Once they got the dam built, then they plugged this and started the reservoir filling. We're going on down the road here just a little bit, and we're going to show you this little grave site down here. There's a lot of history there, which Jim will go ahead and explain. So let's head on down the hill here. Okay, we just hiked up from the road down below. It's kind of to the right there on that ridge. That's about where the construction camp was. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jim. Tell you a little bit about the gravesite up here of Captain James C. Hunt. He was with the 1st Cavalry Division, and there's a little bit of history behind this guy.
Here we are at Captain Hunt's gravesite. Captain Hunt served in the 1st Cavalry during his military period. He ultimately ended up delivering mail for Prescott and was working for the Walnut Grove Water Storage Company and was one of the last people to see the dam intact. He and Superintendent Brown watched it fail that late night in February of 1890. Now, he died just a month after the failure of the dam, and why he's buried here, we don't know, but this may have been his, he may have had a home here. We're trying to understand, but this is his grave site. This is a burial site apparently for infants. Although we found no other graves, we did find one other grave for an adult, and we'll take you over and show you that right now. Here we are at the one other grave that's marked near Captain Hunt's grave. This is for William Andrew Woodward, born in 1855, died in 1925. There's supposedly other cemeteries, or other graves out here at the cemetery, but we haven't found any indications yet.
Next stop is Prescott. Let's go to town and see what kind of trouble we can get into there. We're downtown Prescott. This is the outside of the Palace Saloon downtown. As you can see, it's pretty busy. 4th of July weekend. A lot of things going on here besides the big rodeo that's built, the oldest rodeo in the world. Okay, we're going to go inside now and have a quick look inside at the old safe. As you walk into the saloon, look at the wall on the right side and you'll see the old safe. It's kind of right there. It's got some lights on. It's pretty neat. Just a few blocks from downtown is the Charlotte Hall Museum. It has some old buildings, log cabin type. There was a lot of history they've got documented here. It's worth the trip to go in and have a look around. Well, up this part of Arizona, you might take a trip down to Wickenburg, named after John Wickenburg, who discovered the vulture mine. And they've got a museum here that's really worth going over and spending some time in. And the people are pretty well can tell you a lot about the history here. And there's an old train across the museum. And in town, if you want something good to eat, there's always an Anitas, which is really good Mexican food and is always busy every day of the week. Just a few miles out of town is Vulture City, which was the mining camp for Vulture Mine. You can go inside here and pay a couple bucks and walk around, go through all the buildings, see what they have on display here. A lot of old mining equipment, a lot of history here. They got it set up pretty nice. So if you get a chance and you get a few minutes, just head on out this way. They'd be very happy to see you and tell you a lot about it. One of the buildings we went into had some big old mining equipment. It's pretty fascinating, and an old truck, which we thought was pretty cool. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks a lot for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. You can go to my website, www.desertroamerpress.com, and I'll do a write-up about what I find out here so you can see it on my blog. So good hunting, and we'll catch you on the next one.